Are you ready to learn the shocking truth about why the most experienced and fearless warriors of the Great Plains avoided what any modern person would consider a lifesaver? Today, we will reveal the forgotten wisdom of our ancestors, which will completely transform your understanding of the philosophy of survival in the wild. Water has always been considered a sacred source of life, especially in the arid regions of North America. But did you know that for the Lakota tribe, full-flowing rivers and tranquil lakes were often synonymous with mortal danger? In this video, we'll explore the unique tactics of these nomads that aren't covered in school textbooks. Why could a sip of cool water cost the entire community its life? Be sure to watch this episode all the way to the end. We'll show how a single fatal mistake in choosing a place to camp could wipe an entire settlement off the face of the earth, and what terrifying discoveries forced warriors to retreat deep into the lifeless prairies. Trust me, the ending of this story will make you look at even a routine trip to the woods in a whole new light. You won't hear this on other channels. Buckle up, we're starting. What if I told you that everything you believed about safety near the water is completely untrue? A thick morning fog often rose over the river in the earliest hours before dawn. This dense white veil completely obscured the outlines of the banks, trees, and bushes. Under such conditions, lookouts were physically unable to spot approaching strangers or assess the threat. Visibility dropped to just a few meters, turning the open space into a dangerous blind trap. Experienced Lakota trackers knew the physical properties and density of the river fog perfectly well. It was always thicker, wetter, and colder than the fog that occasionally settled on the high hills. Not only did silhouettes disappear behind this dense veil, but smells were also significantly muffled. The lack of visual control made the entire camp extremely vulnerable to a sudden attack. That is precisely why the chief strictly forbade setting up teepees in the lowlands near riverbeds. The misty haze could linger over the water's surface until late afternoon. The sun's rays struggled to penetrate this impenetrable white veil. This natural phenomenon gave a potential enemy a huge advantage in terms of time. Attackers could approach the dwellings themselves completely unnoticed by the guards. Such a tactical error often proved too costly for the entire nomadic tribe. The camp's location on high ground radically shifted the situation in favor of the defenders. From the high hill, the lookouts could calmly observe the endless sea of fog below. Any large-scale movement in the white veil caused ripples and gave away the presence of strangers. The guards sounded the alarm in time, quickly rousing the other sleeping warriors. The advantage of height and excellent visibility nullified all the enemy's hidden tricks. The morning mist over the water formed due to the sharp drop in nighttime temperatures. The cool night air sank heavily into the valley, displacing the remaining warmth from the current. There, dense condensation formed, which the weak morning breeze could not quickly disperse in the lowlands. For the tribes of the Great Plains, this natural phenomenon was well known and understood. They used this knowledge to plan their campsites and migration routes wisely. Dwellings were positioned so that the main entrance always faced due east. This allowed the very first rays of the sun to penetrate inside and brightly illuminate the space. Situated on high ground, the teepees warmed up much faster than in the damp and dark lowlands. The fresh morning breeze blew away the last traces of nighttime moisture from the thick leather covers. The settlement awoke to clarity, warmth, and full readiness for the new day. This approach demonstrates a profound understanding of the complex landscape and harsh climate of the prairies. Nature was perceived not as a hostile force, but as a set of strict and immutable laws. Strict adherence to these laws guaranteed survival in the harsh conditions of the Wild West. The river provided precious moisture, but it could also be the cause of total ruin. Rule number 1 states, never let the landscape cloud your judgment. We'd love to hear your perspective. What do you think of this approach to choosing a safe spot? Share your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to our channel to get more unique historical insights. The secret, passed down from generation to generation, lies in the sounds of the current. The water in lowland rivers is never completely silent or still. The constant lapping of waves against the rocky shore creates a continuous and dense background noise. On shallow rapids, this sound is amplified many times over, turning into a steady, low hum. This hum is capable of absorbing and drowning out any other sounds within a radius of several hundred meters. Keen hearing was the second most important natural tool after sharp eyesight. Experienced Lakota warriors could distinguish the crack of a dry twig from an incredibly great distance. They could unerringly pinpoint the exact direction from which the slightest suspicious rustle came. But near the roaring riverbed, this vital skill became utterly useless. The loud roar of the water drowned out the cautious footsteps of approaching people and the clatter of their gear. At night, the importance of keen hearing increased many times over for all the sentries. It was in the thick darkness that sounds reliably warned of the approach of uninvited guests. If the camp was situated right by the river, the night watch was effectively deaf. The murmur of the turbulent rapids perfectly masked even the accidental clang of a weapon or the fall of a stone. The enemy could silently take out the sentries, relying solely on the cover of the water. Choosing a campsite on high ground completely solved this complex acoustic problem. The sound of flowing water remained far below and did not interfere with the guards' duties at all. The wind rained on the high hills, reliably carrying sounds from afar. The ringing silence of the prairies allowed one to hear a stranger long before he came into view. The wind rustled evenly through the grass, and any disruption of this familiar rhythm instantly set one on guard. The acoustics of the vast open spaces worked in favor of those who occupied the high ground. Sound waves traveled unimpeded, echoing clearly off the hard, dry earth. Riverbanks, thickly covered with brush, on the other hand, absorbed and severely distorted the echo. When in a low-lying area, a sentry lost the ability to accurately judge the distance to the source of the sound. This disoriented the guards and catastrophically reduced the overall security of the vast nomadic encampment. The Lakota carefully and thoroughly analyzed the soundscape before setting up their dwellings. They listened intently to the whisper of the wind and the distant sounds of the night steppe. If the sound of water dominated the chosen site, it was deemed unsuitable for a long-term camp. This was an unquestionable, strict rule that allowed for no exceptions, even after long, exhausting treks. Preference was always given to quiet hills, where every rustle was of particular importance. Sometimes the riverbeds were calm, but an invisible acoustic danger still remained. The steep clay banks resonated strongly, creating deceptive illusions for the human ear. Sounds could bounce strangely off the water, altering their original, true direction. Enemy military units often moved covertly along deep riverbeds. They skillfully used the noise of the rapids to conceal their massive, rapid advance. Stopping on the bank meant voluntarily setting up camp right on the main road of war. Retreating deeper into the plain meant wisely leaving this highly dangerous route. Rule number 2 states, your hearing must be as clear as spring water. Do you agree that sound can be more important than sight at night? In the next chapter, you will learn why the air near the river could destroy weapons. What the government doesn't want you to know has long been known to indigenous peoples. The air in a river valley is always saturated with tiny, invisible droplets of water. This constant dampness imperceptibly, but inexorably, seeps into any material. For a Lakota warrior, his ideal weapon was essential for survival on the prairies. Prolonged proximity to water threatened to render his entire arsenal completely useless. The strong bow traditionally remained the primary and most reliable weapon for long-range combat. The bowstring for this instrument was made from carefully dried and twisted sinew. This durable material reacted instantly and sharply to the slightest changes in air humidity. In damp lowlands, the sinews quickly swelled, stretched, and irrevocably lost their combat elasticity. A shot from such a ruined bow became weak and completely unpredictable in its trajectory. The wooden frame of the bow itself also suffered greatly from the constant exposure to nighttime dampness. The wood greedily absorbed moisture, losing its natural flexibility and necessary springiness. The special glue used to secure the tendons to the back of the bow began to slowly soften. At the most critical moment of a fierce battle, such a weapon could simply fall apart in the archer's hands. Experienced warriors protected their bows from destructive dampness more than from the heat of battle. When the tribes acquired firearms, this problem only worsened many times over. Black powder was extremely sensitive to the humidity level in the surrounding atmosphere. It was enough to spend just one night by the river for the precious gunpowder to become damp. The gun would miss fire, leaving a person completely defenseless against any external threat. The dry air of the windswept highlands guaranteed the flawless reliability of every charge and shot. The treacherous moisture also had a devastating effect on all the tribe's leather protective gear. Shields made of thick rawhide lost their incredible, almost stone-like hardness. A wet shield became impossibly heavy, too soft, and easily pierced by an enemy arrow. Sturdy footwear and long quivers warped, causing immense physical discomfort while moving. Keeping all equipment in a perfectly dry condition required constant and enormous effort. Kindling a life-saving fire in the damp river valley was also an incredibly difficult task. The brushwood and firewood gathered on the low riverbank always contained a high percentage of moisture. They were extremely hard to get going, gave off little useful heat, and smoked profusely. Drying wet clothes and gear after a downpour in the valley took a full day. The stagnant, humid air greatly hindered the rapid evaporation of water from wet surfaces. In the open, biting wind of the hills, items dried completely in a matter of hours. Rapid drying prevented the spoilage of valuable property and preserved the people's good health. In the harsh conditions of an endless nomadic life, time was the most precious resource. The Lakota warriors understood the chemistry and physics of natural materials on a deep, intuitive level. They knew for certain that water could destroy what the enemy could not break. Caring for their equipment required choosing the right climate zone for their camp. By climbing a hill, they reliably protected their bows and guns from invisible destruction. Rule number 3 states, keep your weapons dry so they can save you. Please like this video right now to support our channel. Guess what happened next to those who slept carelessly at the water's edge? The Great Plains are famous for their extremely unpredictable and powerfully destructive weather phenomena. A severe thunderstorm can break out dozens of miles away from the Indian settlement itself. Rainwater from vast areas instantly rushes into dry or shallow riverbeds. This phenomenon transforms a calm, babbling brook into a roaring, muddy torrent in a matter of minutes. A flash flood always strikes a sleeping camp without any visible warning. The night campsite may be bathed in bright sunlight and completely dry. But a gigantic wall of muddy water, carrying broken trees, crashes down with incredible suddenness. The speed of this torrent is so great that it is practically impossible to escape it. The water level rises several meters in a fraction of a second, sweeping away all obstacles. The Lakota knew all too well the explosive nature of prairie rivers and their inherent treachery. They had seen countless times how the water element wipes centuries-old trees from the face of the earth. Setting up their dwellings in the floodplain meant playing a deadly game of roulette with nature. Even wide, dry sandbars were considered an extremely dangerous place to spend the night. The risk of irretrievably losing all their valuable possessions and supplies was simply too great. Escaping from the very epicenter of a sudden flood in the darkness of night is absolutely impossible. The raging water instantly sweeps away heavy yurts, precious supplies, and all gathered equipment. In the ensuing panic, people simply cannot find their way to the high, safe banks. The current relentlessly drags along everything in its destructive path. Survival in such a massive natural disaster comes down to blind and extremely rare luck. Choosing high ground guaranteed 100% safety from such natural disasters. The hills always remain dry, regardless of the amount of precipitation falling in the distant mountains. The raging water rushed far below, causing no harm to the nomadic settlement. The Indians could calmly watch the fury of the elements from a completely safe distance. Nature could not catch them off guard thanks to such competent and far-sighted planning. Traces of past major floods always served as a reliable warning for experienced scouts. They studied the level of debris caught in the branches of the tallest trees with the utmost care. This clear mark indicated the maximum height the water had reached in previous years. They always set up camp well above this invisible but potentially deadly line. The experience of many generations of ancestors was the most reliable guide when choosing a new territory. In the spring, the danger of severe flooding increased due to the rapid melting of snow. Overflowing rivers burst their banks, flooding vast areas of the surrounding plains. The land in the lowlands quickly turned into an impassable, sticky, and very muddy swamp. Experienced leaders always personally and very carefully inspected the chosen site in case of a flood. They visually assessed the slope of the terrain and possible escape routes at the slightest sign of danger. This was a crucial part of their direct responsibility to ensure the safety of the entire people. Strict military discipline in these matters of life and death allowed for absolutely no leniency. Rule number 4 states, raging water can come when it is least expected. Have you ever encountered the incredible force of a sudden natural phenomenon? In the next chapter, you will learn why even standing water poses an invisible threat. Plains rivers tend to change their course frequently after heavy spring floods. The water recedes, leaving behind a vast number of small, completely isolated lakes. These pools heat up very quickly and intensely under the scorching summer sun of the prairies. Hidden threats, invisible to the human eye, begin to develop rapidly in the stagnant, warmed water. By drinking from such a source, a traveler put their health at enormous and unjustified risk. The Native American tribes of the Great Plains were very careful about the quality of the water they consumed. Clean, flowing water was always considered safer, fresher, and more suitable for drinking. But even near fast-moving currents, stagnant, heavily marshy sections of the shore often formed. Heavy vapors from these backwaters brought with them debilitating fevers and incredible weakness. Prolonged exposure to such swampy areas quickly drained the strength of entire families. The foul-smelling miasmas of the marshes thickly enveloped the lowlands with a heavy, distinctive odor of natural decay. The Lakota sincerely believed that this bad air robbed warriors of their vital energy. Modern science fully confirms that the vapors from abundantly decaying plants are toxic. Constant inhalation of such air over the course of several weeks inevitably led to illness. The high-altitude camp on the hill was completely free from this harmful and invisible influence. The dense, impenetrable thickets near the standing water greatly hindered free movement around the camp. It was extremely difficult for the women to gather firewood and go about their daily household chores. The space in the lowlands was always severely limited by lush vegetation and the steep bends of the riverbed. On the open plateau, there was more than enough room to set up hundreds of huge, spacious dwellings. The vast steppe expanse perfectly matched the free spirit of the nomadic Native American people. Access to clean drinking water was organized according to very clear and strict rules. Water was always collected at a strictly defined time of day, usually very early in the morning. For this purpose, they carefully selected areas with the fastest current and a solid, rocky bottom. The collected life-giving water was stored in special, reliable containers within the camp itself. This approach completely eliminated the need for people to remain constantly near the water's edge. If a large-scale encampment was planned for a long stay, scouts would purposefully search for hidden underground springs. The key ice-cold water, gushing powerfully from beneath the ground, was crystal clear and delicious. These valuable sources were often located far from the main, more polluted riverbed. Knowledge of such places was the most important strategic secret of every tribe on the Great Plains. The springs ensured complete food security and independence from large open bodies of water. Traditional Lakota medicine actively used clean water to purify the body. However, they always strictly separated water used for rituals from water used for drinking. A deep understanding that stagnant river water brings misfortune was firmly rooted in the culture. The strict avoidance of marshy lowlands was dictated by centuries of harsh survival experience. Rule 5 states, always run from water that has forgotten how to flow. What I am about to demonstrate must not be attempted in the field without proper training. In the harsh era of constant intertribal clashes, the landscape always played a decisive tactical role. Whoever fully controlled the high ground held the initiative in any possible battle. A river valley was a natural trap with extremely limited escape routes. The Lakota viewed absolutely every hill as a potential impregnable natural fortress for defense. Locating a large camp on high ground provided an incredible view for miles around. Lookouts could easily spot the dust from an approaching force from a great distance, even on the horizon. This provided precious extra time to fully prepare to repel any surprise attack. In the river valley, visibility was severely limited by the nearest bend in the river or by dense, tall trees. The elevation completely deprived the enemy of its main tactical advantage, the element of complete and absolute surprise. Attacking a fortified camp situated on a steep hillside was an incredibly difficult task. The enemies had to struggle to climb upward, losing precious speed and the cohesion of their ranks. The defenders had the overwhelming advantage of gravity, raining a hail of arrows down on the attackers' heads. The attackers' strength quickly waned as they struggled to climb such steep terrain. This natural barrier worked far better than any artificially erected wooden defensive walls. In the event of an urgent need to retreat, the high hill offered more safe options. The defenders could instantly scatter in different directions across the vast open prairie. The river, however, often became an insurmountable barrier, pinning the fleeing people firmly against the water. To find oneself trapped between fierce attackers and the deep, turbulent riverbed meant certain death. The Lakota never allowed themselves to be caught in such a foolish and hopeless situation. Constant visual surveillance of the area allowed for excellent coordination among several large groups. Signals sent via mirrors or smoke signals were clearly visible from other hills. Neighboring friendly settlements could come to the rescue very quickly in case of danger. Skillful defense planning always took into account the minutest features of the local terrain and slopes. The teepees were arranged to create tight defensive perimeters around the center of the settlement. On the open, flat expanse of a hill, it was possible to organize an ideal and impregnable circular defense. Along a coastline indented by deep ravines, such strict military order was physically impossible. The geometry of the camp depended directly and heavily on the flatness of the elevated site chosen for it. The psychological aspect of commanding height also played a very significant and important role. The sight of a massive settlement proudly towering over the plain inspired genuine respect and fear. Enemies thought twice before attacking such a well-fortified and prepared position. A demonstration of confident strength often prevented bloodshed before it even began. Rule 6 states, "Whoever stands firmly above controls the entire battlefield with confidence." Have you ever noticed how much the strategic view changes from the top of a high hill? In the next chapter, you will learn why winter frost made the river even more dangerous. Winters on the Great Plains are always marked by severe frosts and biting, icy winds. Successful survival during this difficult period depended entirely on proper preparation and positioning. Cold, frosty air is physically heavier than warm air, so it always rushes rapidly down into the lowlands. In winter, a river valley quickly turns into a kind of giant natural reservoir for bitter cold. The temperature there is always a few critical degrees lower than on the surrounding dry plateaus. The Indians understood these laws of cold air movement perfectly and very deeply. They knew for certain that spending the night in an icy river hollow would rob them of their last shreds of precious warmth. Firewood, smoldering weakly in the lowlands, could not cope with this concentrated, bone-chilling cold. The bitter frost penetrated even the thickest furs and blankets, binding people in invisible ice. Avoiding these dangerous frost pockets was the key to survival in January. The ice cover on frozen rivers also harbored hidden and very dangerous hazards. Beneath the seemingly solid surface, a fast and strong current of icy water always flowed. Thin autumn ice could very easily break under the weight of a person carrying a load. Falling through the ice into an icy hole in severe frost meant almost certain and very rapid death. Crossing frozen riverbeds was always done with the utmost and extreme winter caution. The complex process of harvesting ice for drinking water also required specific skills and deep knowledge. The Indians cut ice only in proven, well-known spots in absolutely shallow water. They carefully avoided deep, dark pools where the icy crust was particularly treacherous and brittle. Melting the ice required a great deal of time and precious reserves of collected dry firewood. Rule 7 states, winter frost always settles heavily where water once flowed. Reliable protection from winter winds was another crucial strategic task for the entire tribe. In river valleys, the wind often changed direction, swirling erratically between the steep banks. Deep snowdrifts in the river valleys often reached heights of several times a person's height. Escaping from such a snow trap after a strong and prolonged blizzard was practically impossible. The constant wind on the plateau blew away most of the fluffy snow, leaving a dense, hard crust. It was incredibly easy to move in any direction on snowshoes over such a convenient crust. Maintaining high mobility was vital for a successful search for food during the cold winter. For the subarctic peoples with whom the Lakota sometimes crossed paths, such cold was the absolute norm. They also diligently avoided spending the night on the bare ice of large bodies of water unless absolutely necessary. A wealth of experience in surviving extreme sub-zero temperatures was carefully passed down by word of mouth. The ability to correctly read the complex winter landscape distinguished an experienced tracker from a young and inexperienced one. Mistakes in assessing the winter terrain were never forgiven by the harsh and unforgiving nature of the prairies. The long winter was a severe test of endurance for the entire vast nomadic community. A well-chosen and wisely selected site ensured the survival of the entire tribe without loss until spring. Finding the perfect balance between shelter from the wind and avoiding frost pits was a true art. Wise elders drew on all their experience to safely guide the people through the bitter cold. In winter, the river became an impassable barrier, crossed only when absolutely necessary. These winter survival rules of the Lakota nomads saved them time and again during the harshest years. The invisible cold of the prairies was overcome not only by fire, but also by the proper placement of dwellings. Reason prevailed over the instinctive desire to hide in a deep pit from the strong wind. This unique experience of adaptation deserves the most careful and in-depth study and sincere respect. The Great Plains yielded only to those who knew how to play by their harsh winter rules. The layout of a nomadic settlement on a high hill always followed strict traditional rules and order. Each individual dwelling had its own clearly defined and predetermined place within the vast tribal circle. At the very center of the camp was always a wide, flat area for general assemblies and councils. This circular architectural layout symbolized the unbreakable unity and equality of all tribe members. The distance between the teepees was calculated so as not to obstruct the free passage of people in any way. The largest tents of noble warriors and chiefs were usually located in the inner ring of honor. At the very edges were the dwellings of young families and less prominent ordinary tribesmen. This wide outer radius served as the very first line of defense in the event of a sudden night attack. Guards who patrolled the camp around the clock moved freely and unimpeded between the outer rows of teepees. The precise geometry ensured maximum efficiency of the entire internal logistics of this mobile settlement. The process of setting up the teepees was an exceptionally important and honorable duty for women in Lakota culture. The women handled the heavy wooden poles and massive covers with great skill and speed. They knew how to calculate the angle of inclination with perfect precision so that the dwelling could withstand hurricane-force winds. On a hill exposed to the elements, this construction skill took on particular importance and critical significance. A teepee that stood firmly and securely was the main guarantee of comfort and safety for the entire family. Means of transportation were left near the dwellings only in the event of a very direct and obvious threat. In relatively peaceful times, transport resources were stationed nearby under the watchful eye of guards. The tall, nutritious grass on the hills provided excellent conditions for stabling these vital resources. Visual surveillance of the property from the high ground was incredibly simple and highly effective for the sentries. The preservation of these resources meant the unconditional preservation of the vitality and mobility of the entire people. The fair distribution of supplies within the circle was strictly and clearly regulated by the tribe's elders. Food and other resources were shared so that none of the tribe's people would suffer acute need. Mutual aid was the primary and only basis for survival in the harsh conditions of the Wild West. The compact arrangement of all the teepees fostered very close interaction and strengthened internal social bonds. The camp always functioned as a single, perfectly coordinated, and very vibrant social organism. In case of extreme necessity, the entire vast settlement could break camp in a flash. It took experienced women only a few minutes to dismantle hundreds of teepees and pack up a huge amount of belongings. Wooden poles were transformed into convenient sleds onto which absolutely all of the family's belongings were loaded. The endless caravan quickly formed a column and swiftly left its campsite on the hill. Maximum mobility was the best response to any unforeseen external challenges from the environment. Everyone maintained the ecological cleanliness of the area around the camp with particular and meticulous care. Any trash was disposed of very far from the dwellings so as not to attract dangerous predators at all. Strict hygiene was the key to good health, especially with such a large concentration of people. The strong winds of the hills did a wonderful job of carrying away unpleasant odors and keeping the air fresh. The nomads treated the land with great respect, taking care not to leave deep scars behind. The sight of the vast Lakota camp on the hilltop was truly majestic and unforgettable. Hundreds of magnificently painted teepees stood out against the backdrop of the Great Plains' endless, piercingly blue sky. It was a true pinnacle of nomadic architecture, perfectly and harmoniously integrated into the surrounding landscape. Their encampments were impregnable fortresses without walls, protected solely by wisdom and the laws of nature. Every element of this complex mechanism faithfully served a single great purpose: the survival of the people. If a huge camp was located too far from a river, the issue of water supply always became acute. This required superbly honed logistics and daily, very well organized, heavy physical labor. The uninterrupted delivery of water became the most important and most demanding routine task for all the women. They carefully made their way down to the riverbed or springs, carrying very large, specially designed containers. These expeditions were undertaken exclusively by large groups to ensure maximum collective safety. Traditional water bags were made from thick fabric or specially treated, durable natural materials. This sturdy material was incredibly light, completely waterproof, and highly tear-resistant. A fully filled water bag could weigh several dozen kilograms, requiring tremendous physical endurance. The heavy water was carried on their backs or transported using convenient hand-pulled sleds. The entire supply process was quite labor-intensive, but it completely guaranteed isolation from the dangers of the lowlands. Experienced scouts always mapped out the safest trails to water sources well in advance and with great care. Descent routes were chosen to minimize the risk of falling into any ambush. Large groups of water carriers were very often accompanied by well-armed warriors for additional reliable protection. Approaching the dangerous riverbank was always done with heightened vigilance and full combat readiness. Carelessness at a river watering hole could easily cost the life of more than one unwary person. During particularly dry summer periods, the search for moisture became the work of true masters of tracking. They knew exactly how to find hidden reservoirs in the rocks and in dried-up, crusted riverbeds. An excellent knowledge of moisture-loving plants precisely indicated where to dig through the sand until water appeared. These secret, life-saving wells were guarded like the apple of their eye and carefully concealed from outsiders. Complete independence from major rivers gave the Indian tribe incredible and valuable freedom of movement. During the harsh winter, this task was complicated by the urgent need to break through the thick ice on frozen bodies of water. Very heavy stones and sturdy, pointed wooden stakes were used to create small holes. This grueling work in the biting, icy wind required immense willpower and patience. The ice water had to be brought back to camp incredibly quickly before it froze over again. The logistics of maintaining a steady water supply in winter were a true, harsh test of survival for everyone. For preparing daily meals, they used water that had been naturally filtered through fine sand. The Native Americans dug small, deep pits near the main channel of the fast-flowing, muddy river. Water slowly seeped into these pits, effectively clearing itself of any sediment and large river debris. This ingeniously simple, yet highly effective method yielded crystal-clear drinking water. Constant attention to the quality of drinking water was an integral and vital part of everyday Native American culture. At high-altitude campsites, water was stored in the coolest places, reliably protected from the scorching sun. An extremely careful attitude toward absolutely every drop was instilled from the earliest and most tender childhood. Wasting clean water was considered an absolutely unacceptable extravagance and a very grave sin. Strict conservation of resources was the most natural consequence of life in the harsh conditions of the endless prairies. This highly rational approach allowed a vast tribe to live comfortably far from rivers. On very long military campaigns, warriors made do with the bare minimum of drinking water. They were exceptionally skilled at controlling their thirst simply by placing a small, smooth river pebble in their mouths. This effectively stimulated saliva production and reliably prevented their throats from drying out on the long journey. Their remarkable endurance allowed them to make lightning-fast marches across completely arid territories. Enemies, heavily dependent on major supply sources, were simply physically unable to keep up with them. The Indians always viewed water not merely as a utilitarian resource, but as a great sacred element. Before drawing the precious moisture, they would very often utter quiet words of sincere gratitude. They deeply respected the power of the rivers, but always preferred to maintain the safest possible distance. This ideal balance between sincere reverence and prudent caution was the key to harmony. The distance allowed them to safely enjoy nature's gifts without the slightest risk of becoming its victim. All the daily hardships associated with hauling water up the high hill paid off many times over. The enormous cost of physical labor was utterly insignificant compared to the priceless cost of safety. The Lakota very consciously chose a more difficult way of life in order to gain a strategic military advantage. All of their complex logistics were strictly subordinated to one main goal: the unconditional preservation of life. Every drop of salty sweat saved liters of spilled blood in the event of a sudden enemy attack. In the profound worldview of the peoples of the Great Plains, the Great River had a highly dual and complex nature. On the one hand, it was the vast circulatory system of the prairies, abundantly nourishing all surrounding life. On the other hand, it always represented an unpredictable and blind force, utterly devoid of mercy. Sincere respect for bodies of water was expressed through strict adherence to rigorous rules for interacting with them. Keeping the camp at a strict distance from the riverbed was the most vivid manifestation of this deep philosophical reverence. Low valleys were always considered places of rapid passage, long corridors for travel, not homes. These damp lowlands were inhabited by nature spirits whom it was best never to encounter. To live permanently on such a path meant to rudely and recklessly interfere with the natural order of things. The high hills, on the other hand, represented stable, reliable islands of absolute tranquility in a turbulent world. They offered a unique opportunity to observe the flow of life without becoming its accidental victim. The ancient legends of the Lakota tribe are replete with cautionary tales about the treachery of underwater and river dwellers. These ancient myths contain ingeniously encoded instructions on basic safety techniques. The tale of a mighty river monster dragging people into a whirlpool served as a direct warning of strong and fast currents. Rich folklore served as the best means of passing on invaluable accumulated experience from elders to the young. A healthy fear of the turbulent river was instilled as the ideal tool for preserving the instinct of self-preservation. Water philosophically symbolized constant and rapid change, fluidity, and the incredible unpredictability of the surrounding world. The tribe's vast camp was meant to embody absolute immutability, strength, and strict order. The location of the vast settlement on a solid rocky hill emphasized this vital stability in every way. The wise Native Americans sought to create a reliable and sturdy anchor in the ocean of the endless, grassy prairie. This philosophy of stability dictated very specific architectural and logistical solutions in everyday life. For an experienced warrior, the river very often became a sacred place for rituals of spiritual purification. But immediately after the rite was completed, he always returned to the high ground, to his vast and bustling people. The cold water washed away fatigue and fears perfectly, but could never serve as a permanent refuge. The important boundary between the world of the sacred and turbulent elements and the world of humans was strictly observed. According to ancient beliefs, any violation of this invisible boundary inevitably led to great misfortune. A deep understanding of the river's ways allowed them to masterfully use it as a powerful weapon against any enemy. Lakota warriors could easily drive the enemy onto the marshy bank or trap them at a steep cliff. They skillfully turned the immense power of nature against those who were completely unaware of its harsh laws. True wisdom lay not in the senseless subjugation of the elements, but in the ability to cooperate harmoniously with them. This complex cooperation required distance, deep respect, and constant, attentive observation. Life on the high, windswept hills shaped the entire tribe's uniquely proud and independent character. They were accustomed to always viewing the world from above, surveying the incredibly vast and boundless expanses. The free, strong winds of the prairies perfectly tempered their bodies and filled their broad, free souls. The narrow, overly dark, and very damp river valleys always stifled this expansive steppe spirit. Their unique mentality was simply inseparable from the boundless horizons and the high plateaus, open to all the winds. Violent conflicts with the new settlers very often arose from a completely different understanding of the landscape. White people always stubbornly sought to build their fortified forts and towns right on the water's edge. They dammed up fast-flowing streams, mercilessly cut down riparian forests, and destroyed the natural balance they were accustomed to. To the Native Americans, such selfish behavior seemed not only unthinkably foolish, but also downright sacrilegious. This profound difference in survival philosophies became one of the main causes of the inevitable tragic clashes. Today, these ingenious principles for choosing a campsite are a source of genuine admiration for modern survival experts. Leading military tacticians still closely study the logic behind Native American movements and high-altitude campsites. What seemed to Europeans like primitive savagery turned out to be the pinnacle of adaptation to a harsh natural environment. The Lakota created a completely ideal and perfect safety system, using only rocks and strong winds. Their ancient knowledge remains extremely relevant for anyone who challenges wild and unforgiving nature. A deep respect for the wisdom of the great ancestors greatly helps preserve the memory of the great nomadic peoples. A true understanding of the reasons behind their daily actions reveals to us an incredible picture of a rich past. The great river continues to flow smoothly, just as it did hundreds of years ago, faithfully guarding its ancient secrets. And we can only learn attentively and gratefully from the experience of those who knew its true value. This unique experience is truly a priceless treasure of all of world human history and culture. Which of these survival lessons from nomadic tribes do you think remain relevant today? Suggest topics for future videos you'd like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on new exciting episodes.